The day that Tim Hubner shared with me that Nathan Bedford Forrest slave auction house sat just in the shadows of this church was one of the most difficult days of my life. It was not born out of any sense of naivete about Memphis history. I've lived here all of my adult life. I know Memphis history pretty well. But that statement was personal for me. It was personal for me because this place in which we sit today is home for me. This is the place where, as a 19-year-old college student, I wandered into the Episcopal Church for the first time. This is the place where I came to love her prayers and her hymns and her traditions. This was a place where I worshiped Sunday after Sunday. This is a place where, at that very altar rail, I was fed from the Lord's table every week. This is a place where I grew in community. I grew in my understanding of God. I was welcomed by people who loved me. This was the very place where the seeds were being planted for me to go on to ordained ministry. I understood that slave hands had helped build this place. But there was just something different about a revelation that worshipers were coming to this church week after week after week, with a slave auction house sitting right in the shadows, and seeing that week after week after week after week, worshiping on Sunday and coming back on Monday to transact their business, to purchase children of God who looked like me. Somehow easily reconciling their faith with the ownership of other human beings. But those images weren't so easily reconciled for me, and for a fleeting moment, this place that has always been my home didn't feel very much like home. The truth of our shared history, and it is our shared history. There is no black history, there is no white history. There is the history of all of us who have lived in this country together for 400 years. The truth of that history is that there's a lot of painful stuff in our history. But now we walk a reality together. And together we must hold one another, not in bitterness, not in hatred, not in anger, but in love. And now in accountability. Because now it is up to us to redress the wrongs of the past. Now it is up to us to figure out how together we move to a better place in the future. Our scriptures are filled with so many images for grace and redemption. The people called Israel had a lot of bitterness and animosity toward those folks from Moab. The Moabites didn't help them. They were coming out of Egypt on their way to the Promised Land, and that enmity continued for a very long time. But the scriptures tell us something important about Moab. And that is a lone Moabite woman traveling with her Israelite mother-in-law into Bethlehem, where she could anticipate nothing more than being treated like garbage, comes in and lives faithfully, marries a pillar of that Israelite community, and goes on to become the ancestor of David, who would be king. And yes, our own Jesus Christ. And Jesus, too, uses the image of a hated stranger, a Samaritan, to instruct us that compassion and goodness and mercy can come from all kinds of unexpected places and people. We cannot expect to emerge from the pain of our past without being willing to be honest about what the impact of all of these things mean to us. I fully believe this day that Dr. King is rejoicing as he looks down on us, because this is a moment of truth-telling for our community that is so long overdue. For a man who came here to fight for the least of these and to stand in the face of oppression and injustice, and as a result take an assassin's bullet. This day must be a day of great rejoicing for him. His work was not done, and neither is ours. Our work cannot be done here in Memphis, Tennessee, as long as African Americans are 2.5 times more likely to live in poverty than white Memphians. Our work here cannot be done as long as African Americans in Memphis are twice as likely to be unemployed as white Memphians. Our work can't be done here. It cannot be done here as long as median incomes for African American households in Memphis are only about 60% of the median incomes of those of white families. Our work cannot be done here when the vast majority of the underperforming schools in the state of Tennessee sit right here in Memphis and serve our poor and vulnerable neighborhoods. Our work can't be done. Our work cannot be done as long as the chain that has sought to monopolize the grocery market in this community walks away from the poorest and most vulnerable people in this community, refusing to serve them. And that is not a call to all of us as a moral crisis. Our work is not done. Our work cannot and will not be done until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. We have a long way to go. We have a long way to go before the vestiges of our past that have held us hostage are finally cut loose. And so today we make tremendous strides in that direction, because today we speak truth. We speak truth. We ask God's forgiveness, and we ask for God's help as we come together as a community to move forward. And in doing so, we honor the life of a man who came to stand for justice among us, whose legacy and whose commitment now must live on in all of us.